Hey, this is your host, Jaryd Krause from the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And in this episode, I spoke to David Barnett from the Business Buyer's Advantage. Now, David has many accolades. He first bought a business and then he went to being a business broker. Now he's a business consultant helping people with a mission to go away and buy businesses that are actually beneficial to them and not destructive. And that's what we talk about in this actual episode, and how to buy a business that is going to allow you to achieve a lifestyle you really want, rather than buying yourself a job and having to be in the business working as a technician and not having a lifestyle that you first initially wanted when buying this investment. So if you're looking at buying websites for passive income and having a lifestyle where you can enjoy yourself, please be sure to listen to this episode because it's very valuable. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Buying Online Business podcast. And today I'm so grateful to be able to speak to Mr. David Barnett from Small Business and Deal Making. Now, David, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jaryd. It's great to be on.
And so, David, I noticed you've done so many things. You've gone away and written multiple books. You've helped so many people, buy businesses. And that's something we're going to be talking about today, particularly buying businesses and not so much buying yourself a job. But I wanted to ask, are you able, instead of me listing off all of your accolades that you have, are you able to, share us a bit about your story and how you got started into, this buying business and selling business realm, and, what you've achieved along the way in a non-humble approach?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've always been interested in business. When I was a child, a teenager, I was involved in any kind of business I could get my hands on. Because I wanted to get money, so I'm from Canada. So I was shoveling driveways and I was mowing lawns and doing all those kind of childhood business things that people would do. And I eventually became a sales representative for a greeting card company that sold from catalogs. And I used to have, customers through the neighborhood. And as I got older, I knew that I wanted to do something in business. And so I went to university to do a business school program, believing I would become a businessman. But about third year in, I realized that they were trying to turn me into what I refer to as a Fortune 500 bureaucrat, just one of those middle manager people within the big company. And when I got out of business school, that's when I got my dream job for a real education in small business, because I got to join the Yellow Pages. And so I would go and visit I don't know if you remember the Yellow Pages, Jaryd.
Yeah,
but
I do.
okay, because back in the 90s, if you typed plumber into Google, you would get a plumber in California, because they hadn't figured out how to do local searching yet. So if you would walk into your house anywhere else in the world and you found a leak in the pipes, you would grab that book and you would open it up under plumber, because you needed someone who could come over to your house right away and fix that problem. And so I would go and I would visit, and I'm just remembering now that you used to be a plumber, so was completely mental. But
That's right. Well done.
so I would go and I would visit all of these businesses, and I would talk with the owner and manager, and I would figure out what kind of customers they wanted to have, because I would ask them questions like, when the phone rings, who would you like it to be on the other end? And how do you earn money, and how can I help you earn money? And so I got to learn about how all of these regular everyday businesses were actually run. Eventually, I realized the Yellow Pages days were probably numbered because of what was happening online. And so I went and left, and I started a business with a friend. And after about 18 months, I decided I didn't like it, and I sold it. That was the first business I ever sold. And we really lucked out because we sold it to a stand-up guy, and the deal worked out great. But later, when I became more familiar with buying and selling businesses, I realized that I'd opened myself up to a bunch of different ways in which I could have been taken advantage of, but luckily I wasn't. I started another business, which was brokering commercial debt. So I used to do broker bank loans, commercial mortgages, leases on equipment, what we call capital leases, as well as operating leases, and factoring of accounts receivable. So sometimes when a business sells to other businesses, they wait 30 days to get paid, and I could arrange for them to sell their receivables in order to get money right away. So I was doing all this financing stuff for small businesses, and while I was doing it, I kept running into people who were trying to get money to buy existing businesses. And what shocked me is that they were dealing with people who were completely incompetent. So, you know, I remember there was this one time I got a phone call from a bank, a big Main Street bank, and the banker said, David, I've got this couple here. I think they need your help. They have a contract, which is a home purchase real estate contract, which has been written up to describe the purchase of a convenience store. And it says they have 10 days to get 95% financing. And in those days, you could buy a house under those terms, but you've never been able to buy a business here under those kinds of terms. So what had happened is that they had found a real estate agent who called a bunch of convenience stores and found someone willing to sell. And the agent had no idea how to sell a business, but they wanted to try to earn themselves a commission. And so I saw that the market was very underserved. And when we got that financial crisis in 08, 09, a lot of the companies that I was using as a source of capital went under. And I decided that I would become a business broker. And this is where I got my real education in buying and selling businesses, because I joined up with a large international franchise brand because they gave me access to training. And I spent 2.5 years and a couple of weeks going away to do coursework, which came in the end to a big exam I had to write. And I actually became certified in being a business broker. And I was the first person in my province here on the east coast of Canada, New Brunswick, to become certified as a business broker. And that designation had been around for 40 years. So I was operating, I started to help people. Over a 3-year period, I sold 36 businesses for other people. And
congrats, that's amazing.
Well, thank you. It sounds exciting. And you know what? It was exciting. And being a business broker was amazing because you have this incredibly difficult problem of taking a business, and in reality, a business is a system. It's a place where people, capital in various forms, and a place operate together to create a cash flow. And you have to take that system and you have to be able to present it in a way that can be conceptualized for someone to understand what's going on over there and be willing to pay money in order to acquire the cash flow. And so it's a problem on many levels, and you have a buyer and seller who each have their own ends and desires, and you have to try to work it together and then deal with all the other people, the accountants, the lawyers, the bankers, sometimes government officials, depending on the type of business. And you have to make everything fit, and then and only then does the broker get a commission. And so the very first business I listed for sale in 2008 was a fried chicken franchise, and the very last business I sold at the end of 2011 was that chicken franchise. So it took me 3 years to sell that business, to get all of those things to fall into place. And so while I'm telling you I sold 36 businesses, I can also reveal that there were 3 different periods. One of them was 9 months long where I had no closings. So for 9 months, 1 year, I paid all my bills at home, my office overhead, my assistant, all of my ad programs, everything, with no money coming in.
No income.
And, at the end of 2011, I was looking at a fall with 6 deals closing, and I was going to bring in $250,000 of commissions. And then one deal fell apart because it was a franchise operation, and the franchisor was a jerk to the buyer. And the buyer said, there's no way I'm doing business with those guys. So that deal fell apart. And then another deal, the bank had issued a finance letter and then changed their mind. So that deal fell apart. And then a third deal was in a regulated industry, and a government department wouldn't give the buyer the license they needed. And so my 6 deals for $250,000 became 3 deals for 110. And that just happened to equal what I owed Visa and MasterCard. And so I said, this is crazy. I can't continue to be in a business where everyone else gets a say in whether or not I'm successful. But the buyer, the seller can both agree on everything. And then these outside forces come into play, which causes me not to get paid. And so that's when I made the decision to leave the industry, and I became a banker. And I started working for the bank, and I was covering a big area. And so I would spend a lot of time in my car, and my phone would ring. People would call me up and they would say, Dave, I was given your name. I'm trying to buy a business, or I want to sell my business, and I heard you could help me. And I would tell people, no, that's not true. I'm not a broker anymore. And then one day this guy named Bob called and he said, Dave, I'm trying to buy this business. My lawyer's telling me one thing, my accountant's telling me another thing. They're both telling me what I need out of the deal, but neither seems to be able to give me advice on how to stick handle through this process. can I get you to help me? And I said, Bob, I'm not a broker anymore. I'm working for the bank full time. I could probably help you, but it's not really my thing. I'd have to charge you like a consultant, and it can't be during business hours. And he said, great, Saturday morning at 9, where do you live? I'll come to your house. And so Bob came to my house Saturday morning, and I helped him for a few hours, and he gave me a fistful of cash. And that was the beginning of a little side hustle consulting business that eventually grew. And 2 years later, the bank decided to restructure their team. And I raised my hand. I said, if you need to get rid of somebody, it can be me, because I have this other
And
thing
income
going.
stream.
Yeah. And so I knew that if I could put, and this, if I could put my full-time hours into it, I was going to have no problem building it up. And so basically what I did is I turned the whole business brokerage model on its head. Instead of being an agent representing people, I started acting more like an accountant or a lawyer, saying, come to me, I'll help you, and then I'll bill you. And so that's the cornerstone of my business today. Is I'm a consultant. People come to me, I help them, either buyers or sellers, and I've got a menu for both buyers and sellers of things that I do. I do those things, I charge them. There's no commissions, there's no contingency on the deal closing or anything like that. And what's interesting is that now, when I reflect back on my years as a business broker, I realized the market was trying to tell me all along that there was a demand for this, because I used to get, sellers come in all the time and talk with me about selling their business, and then they would balk at the commission price. They would say, oh, I can't pay that amount. And then I would hear that they had sold their business, and I knew that the information I had given them was valuable in making that deal happen, but I didn't get paid. It's because they were looking for someone to help them. They just didn't need someone to do everything for them.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So that's what I do today. And then to promote myself, I've written some books. So I've got 5 different books up on Amazon right now, and they're all available as audiobooks. And a couple of them were bestsellers, actually. Franchise Warnings was a bestseller, and Invest Local, and How to Sell My Own Business. And then there's a couple more: 21 Stupid Things People Do When Trying to Buy a Business, and 12 Things to Consider Before You Sell Your Business is another one. And I have a YouTube channel with a couple hundred videos, and that's how people come into my sphere. And I've got an online program similar to what you have for people that want to buy a business, and I've helped people with a few online businesses over the last couple of years too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And well done in getting, coming into this sort of realm of buying businesses as a broker and learning about it, and then stepping out and going, wow, there's some really bad things that are happening. And what I picked up there is the biggest thing is you just weren't taking full responsibility for your income as a broker. And that's what I think we could really dive into here in this episode, is that how we should, as investors and new business owners, come in and start, taking full responsibility for what actually happens. Because and I speak to a lot of people, I spoke to somebody yesterday, he's like, oh, my partner just reckons I should just have a good, secure job. And I said to him, like, hang on a second, do you realize that's the most insecure thing you can have? Because, that person that owns the business can click their fingers and you're gone. And that means you're so insecure because you're not getting a paycheck anymore. Whereas opposed to if you do take full responsibility, then you can have more security because you're the one that's responsible for how your income's actually coming in. And
yeah, it's funny because when I, at the end, before I left Yellow Pages, they restructured there, and I became the person in charge of new advertisers.
mm-hmm.
So I was meeting a lot of people who were starting new businesses. So many of them were quite nervous about their new venture. And one of the things I used to point out to them is, look, when you had a job, you had 100% of your income from one source. Now that you're going to be running your own business, you're going to have many, many, many sources of income. And, the popular coffee shop down the street from where you live, if they lose a customer, they don't even notice, right? It's about having that income diversification. And I would agree with you. It's, most business brokers, they have a dozen to 20 listings maybe in their book. And if they do 3, 4, 5 deals a year, then they're doing well. And that, if they only did 3, it's a huge impact, right? It really becomes precarious. And when you get into it, all you see is those big potential commissions, especially when you're dealing with businesses that might sell for $1 million or something. The checks are big. When you get into it and you realize how much work is involved and the opportunities for it to come off the rails, that's when you start to, that risk reward thing in your head starts to go, oh, now I understand why the commission checks are so big. They're hard
Yeah.
to get.
Yes, exactly. It's not just a walk in the park, right? And that's the same with anybody buying a business. And I teach mainly specifically, you're more bricks and mortar, I'm more, website type businesses. But a business is the business, right? And at the end of the day, you do need to put work in for it to run. A lot of my clients, they do go away and hire VAs and they do the kind of work, or they buy businesses that have minimal work required to run them. But I want to talk about that because there's a lot of people that do buy website businesses, and the seller and the broker, they list that only takes 2 hours a week to run the business. Now, I know from experience that when you look, I like to ask them, the seller, what are the actual tasks and how long do they actually take? And then I ask myself, how long would it actually take me to do those tasks as a rookie and as a beginner? And then how long would it take me to do in a year's time or so? And then I get this feeling of like, oh, wow, I've never done those tasks before. Like this could really turn into a job. So talk to me about that. Like, have you seen people go away and just, they want to get out of this job that say they're working at the bank, or say they're working at a coffee shop, or, any sort of retail job, and they go, I'm going to get some money together. They go away and get finance, and then they buy a business, but they're working like 60 hours a week. Or have you had any cases of those come across your desk before?
Yeah. So a lot of the times when businesses are put up for sale on websites, it's a secret market. So you might find, for example, it says family friendly restaurant for sale with sales of $1 million and cash flow to the owner of 120,000. Well, that's the profit of the business as well as the wages of the owner who's acting as the manager. And a lot of people just look at that number and they don't really stop to think about the fact that part of that number is your paycheck for the work you will do. And part of that number is actually the return on the investment you're going to make in buying this business thing.
Oh, wait, so you mean I need to actually work to get that money?
Yeah. And so there's, when I work with people and we do analysis, we do two different levels of income or cash flow. One is called the normalized EBITDA, and the other one's called the normalized seller's discretionary earnings. And so the difference between those two is the fair market value of a manager's wage. Because sometimes, people will sell a business and they'll underpay themselves because they're trying to get the numbers to look better on their income statement. Sometimes people will have a successful business. They'll pay themselves more than a fair market wage, which is their prerogative. They own the business. We need to normalize it all so that we have an idea of what is this work worth. And so if it's a $70,000 job being the manager of the hardware store, for example, then that's what we're going to pay ourselves. So now we can isolate what the profit will be and see if it makes sense for us to make the investment to obtain that additional cash flow. And what's interesting is that, different people have a different set of circumstances. And this is what makes the market so dynamic and exciting, because somebody may be interested in actually buying a job where other people may not, because some people can have jobs for free and other people cannot. So let me give you a couple examples. I once helped a couple that had just immigrated to Canada, and they were educated people, but there was a language barrier there. They were just starting to learn English, and they were coming in and they were paying to buy a little corner store, a little market, and there wasn't a lot of profit there, and they were going to work long hours for essentially a wage. And I remember I was speaking with the banker who was handling their case, and he said, these people are buying a job. That's crazy. And I said, I know, right? How much did you pay for your MBA? At least these people know they're getting a cash flow when they buy this business. When you got your degree, you didn't know you were going to get a job. And if you start to think about it in that context, you realize a lot of people pay money in order to secure a better position for themselves. These guys didn't have the same opportunities that you or I might as native English speakers to just go out and get a job. So they were in that position where it made sense for them to buy what essentially was a job. Now, would it make sense for me to pay that amount for that corner market? No, because I can just go get a job for free. Someone will hire me. And this is why you see these different examples everywhere in the market of some people making decisions that may make sense to them, but it wouldn't make sense for other people.
Yeah. And I see people that are not making a whole lot of money and they want to go away and they want to get started in this industry because they're like, well, I'm not making money as a job. Why don't I just get a business? But that's often not the best, the best solution is first you need to, the reason sometimes people can't get a job is because of a level of education. And that's maybe an education based around the language, or an education based on getting an MBA, which in Australia you go to university and get those types of degrees. But it's the same when you're buying, and this is why people hire you, David, as a consultant. This is why people hire me to help them buy website businesses, is because it's so important to have an education to ensure, even if you are going to buy yourself a job, like, are you going to buy yourself a good job because you need to make an income stream because of a language barrier or something like that. But I feel it's so important to have that level of education first. And what are some of the, like you said, like when you first bought your first business, and you sold it later, you said you opened yourself up to so many risks. Like, what are some of the risks you see people making when they go to buy their first businesses? Like, you've got that book, 21 Stupid Things People Do when trying to buy a business. What are some of the top risks you see people make that, your audience and my audience can really take on board and prevent themselves from doing those things?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some of the top ones. One of the biggest ones is the one we just discussed. So failing to recognize the value of your labor, your time. Another one is failure to recognize impending capital expenditures. So a lot of the times when businesses are presented for sale, they show the cash flow. They'll add back non-cash expenses like amortization and depreciation, because we don't write a check for our depreciation expense. It's the government's way of allowing us to recognize the fact that things are wearing out over time for tax purposes. But what that means is that things are wearing out. So at some point, you're going to have to reinvest. And when it comes to a website business, what that means is that at some point, there's going to be development costs maybe. You're going to have to redesign things. And this isn't cheap. I mean, you could spend a lot of money having a team rebuild a website. And so how long will it be before our site is looking dated? We're going to have to redo things. Or is there an algorithm change over at the search engines that's going to affect us and we have to respond to that? And so these kinds of things have to be taken into account because they're very real costs that are going to come out of that cash flow. And so often people who are selling businesses, they're pricing them for perfection. And when you buy a business, it's typically we frame the purchase price with multiples of earnings, right?
Yes. That's
so
right.
if you bought a business and you paid 2 times annual cash flow, what you're basically saying is, I'm so confident in the future of this business that I'm willing to pledge the next 2 years' earnings and give it to you, Mr. Seller, and I'm going to run it and I'm going to make my money later. Now with financing and stuff, you spread out that out over time, the payment and everything, but essentially you're agreeing that things are so great, you're committing yourself to this time period. And with bricks and mortar businesses, sometimes people can get up there in the multiples a little bit higher. And, I'll ask people, are you fully confident this business will be around in a year in the same way that it is now? And people will go, yeah, great. How about 10 years? And you just can't say that about a business. There's too many ways that a business can become obsolete or be killed,
Especially in this day and age,
Well, anything to do with online is disruptive. But, I've had clients before who owned restaurants where the city has decided to replace water and sewer on their street one summer, and the street was torn up for 3 months in the busiest time of year. And that killed the business.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with their marketing, their employees, their recipes, their service, nothing.
They can't foresee that either, right?
Well, sometimes they're informed. Sometimes the city doesn't even know. Sometimes there's some kind of disruption that has to be responded to, And then suddenly they're in the middle of a 3-month project they never planned, right? So yeah, it can be unforeseen things, and it can kill the business. So the level of risk involved in business is quite high, and that's why the rate of return has to be great. And what that means is that the selling price multiples are dampened, they're lowered, and it brings us back to the key point that it never really makes sense to sell a good business. These businesses only really ever come up for sale when there's a pressing personal matter on the part of the owner that leads them to believe that they can no longer run the business, or they really, really don't want to. And that's what creates the opportunity for the buyer.
Exactly. And so, yeah, one man's trash is another man's treasure type thing in this case, where it's actually, I look, and I was speaking to another guy on the podcast, Richard, who he looks for those opportunities, and then he sells, once he's flipped the site, he sells that's with still massive amounts of opportunities, because he only digs into one and goes really deep into it. And that's the cool thing about people that are buying any type of business, is that there's so many opportunities to grow it. It doesn't matter what, any business can grow, any business can scale. It's just, understanding how do you want to grow this, or how do you want to take advantage of that opportunity before you buy it, and work out a strategy that you can implement once you do take over the keys or take over the business.
The popular advice that I give to a lot of people that I'm working with is find a business that has problems that you know how to solve. Because if the business is profitable today with these problems in place, it means that once you acquire the business, you can put your expertise into it. You can fix those problems, which should cause the earnings to go up. And now it's a more valuable, more profitable business. So this is what creates the deal for you. Now you did well because you paid that lower price. Now it's worth more. Flipping them, I get a lot of people reach out to me and they talk to me about flipping businesses because they get excited about this idea of buying and selling and all this kind of thing. But what happens to most people is they buy one of these things, they improve it, they start to enjoy the cash flow, and then they start to see it from the seller's side and they go, why would I sell this if I could just own it for the next couple of years and get the same money anyway? and they end up hanging on to it for longer, which makes perfect sense, until then something happens in their life that means that they need to pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, I find that as well with my business. I'm like, I could just, when I first got started, I was like, I could just buy this and get rid of it. And that was my default plan, is like, what if I buy this business and it doesn't go so well, or it just stays like neutral and doesn't grow above the threshold that I want to, like, I can just sell the business and get my money back. And the time frame that I own the business, I earn X amount of money. So that was my default. But when I held on to it, I was like, well, this is like awesome, And that's why I think you're very in a high agreement to me, is that, like, why just buy, why start a business when you can buy one that's already working, it's already making money, proven track record, tells you how many hours per week you're going to be running it, and then build up from there. And my favorite thing is that I haven't talked about for quite a few years, but what I started to do with my business, David, was automate them to a certain level that I don't need to do the work. So one of the businesses I bought, it was selling a particular type of product, and it was using manual labor such as virtual assistants to go through the order process. I got a tool built by some developer to eliminate those workers doing that task. So it was more expensive an investment in the short term, but better for me in the long term, and it made more money and less work. And I want to ask you about that as well. Is like, you talk about people that, are buying a business. Some of them are buying a job. And I also noticed you've got some training on how to make your first hire. And that's a way to sort of automate some of your business, I guess, as a bricks and mortar. I want to ask you about that. It's been on the tip of my tongue. Like, I want to ask, like, when your thing is like, when should you make your first hire, and what advice do you have around that?
Oh, sure. So, for people that are in a solo kind of business scenario, initially you're trying to save money and you want to maximize profits. And if there are things that need to be done, you can usually do them yourself. well enough. Many people believe they can do it better than anyone else, but it's not always true. When you start to hit that point of being too busy to do things, what I always recommend is you create a little time grid for yourself, and you actually note what you're doing at different times a day. And then you go and you put a value on that. So if there are tasks that you're doing that are $10 an hour tasks, and other things you're doing that are worth $100 an hour, and really big things like making decisions about acquiring another domain that may be operating already, that's like thousands of dollars an hour value to your business, right? And so then when there's enough of those $10 an hour things, now you're ready to hire someone who can do those lower value things for you and free up your time for the higher value things. It's, nobody became the head of a big company by taking time out to go make their own photocopies. You hire somebody that you can send to do that for you, so that you can focus on the things that are truly valuable. And a lot of the time when I'm helping people buy a business, the seller of the business is not really a business person. They're what we call a technician. So if you think about the auto repair guy who opens a garage, or the plumber who opens his own plumbing outfit, right? They know the trade, and they know the skill, and they know how to deliver service and get results in that technical field. But they never sat down with the aim of designing a business to take advantage of an opportunity in the market to serve a clientele. And, they never had a strategy. And very often the people who are the buyers of the business are people who come from a different space. They're often people who come out of middle management in big companies, or maybe they come out of the military. So they've had a higher income, which allows them to have a bit of savings, number one. But number two, they're used to managing things within systems. So big companies, the military, all these kinds of places, they have systems, they have processes, checklists, etc. And so oftentimes the buyers are able to come into these businesses, just like in your example, and they've been able to create systems that people can follow. And what allows that to happen then is allows you to expand. Last night I was doing a presentation. I used the example of an auto repair place where you have a mechanic, he's fixing the cars, but he's also greeting the customers, answering the phone, ordering the parts, checking the inventory. He gets busy, he hires a second technician, but he's still answering the phone, greeting the clients, ordering the parts, checking the inventory. Then he hires a third person, and now he's so busy because he's still working on cars, he's ordering parts, greeting the clients, counting the inventory, that now he can't grow anymore. So he runs a business like that for 25 years. And then he sells it to somebody who comes in and says, hey, I'm going to delegate the inventory to another person. I'm going to hire someone to work at the front desk and answer the phone. And I'm going to get these other people doing these other things. I'm going to have a system so that every week there's just a page that someone can count inventory and tell us what batteries we need to order, or light bulbs, or what have you. And now he's freed up his bandwidth. He can add technician 4, 5, 6, and 7, and the business can actually start to grow. And that kind of skill set is the entrepreneur's skill set, the tools for analyzing what's going on, how can we make it better, how can we make it more efficient and do more with fewer people. It's very different from the technician who are often the business starters. And they're often driven into that position because they don't like their job, they don't have a good boss, or they've got some kind of attitude problem where no one will hire them, and they're basically forced to do something on their own. Now, when I started with the Yellow Pages, I thought that every person I met was going to be a Rockefeller or a Henry Ford. I just thought, oh, it's great, I'm going to talk to business owners all day. One of the older, one of the gray-haired guys who was on the team, he said, listen, son, here's the truth. 30% of the people you're going to talk to own their own business because they can't work for anybody. Another 30% own their own business because nobody will hire them. Another 30% own their own business because they got fired and no one will hire them. And the other 10% are people who saw an opportunity in the marketplace and decided to build a business to exploit that. He said 1 in 10 are going to be the people you're looking for. The rest are people that know how to do a certain thing and they're trying to apply their trade to earn money. And it was true. It was so true, and there's opportunities everywhere, especially when you have businesses that are not exploiting, new technologies and stuff. I worked with a client once who he wanted to sell his business, and it was a painting contracting firm. And one of the problems is that he was consistently bidding jobs and not earning enough money. And I said, "How do you quote the job?" And he said, "Well, I walk through the house and I just kind of figure how much time it will take." And I was just aghast. I was like, "That's crazy." I'm like, "Don't you want to know how many linear feet of wall there is? And don't you have an idea of how many minutes it takes to paint each linear foot, and how long it takes to paint a window frame and a door frame?" And eventually he built an Excel spreadsheet where he could plug in how many door frames there would be and how many window frames and how many feet of baseboard and how many linear feet of wall there was. And he had it all worked out so that it would calculate his labor. And it was only after he built that tool that he was then able to compare performance on the job site to the metrics he measured initially. And then all of a sudden he was able to identify people that had worked for him for years that were, padding their hours and being lazy and not performing. And it was a shock to him,
Yeah.
Like the reason he wasn't earning money is because people were taking advantage of him, basically. And it was only after he built the systems to allow himself to quote properly that he was able to find the HR problem. And this is often what happens in business: is we build one system to solve a problem, but then it opens the door to the possibility of finding other problems in other areas, which that opportunity to discover the problem was never there before.
Yeah, and that's so huge, and that's what I noticed when I was, even before I got into business. I wanted to start my own gas company and become a gas plumber and start that business. And a lot of people like, you can do that for a certain amount of time, but you're only limited to the amount of hours you can do. And that's what you're talking about, that so many people are technicians in their business. And until I heard the thing that you can either choose to work in your business or work on your business, and that just like exactly what you're saying is that most people buy a job, and if you're buying yourself into a job, that's working in the business rather than on your business. And if you're so in it, it's like if you're got a problem going on in your head or something going on, you're in this and you're frustrated, but if you take yourself out, then you can start to see the solutions, right? And it's the same within your business. And I really got that, and I picked up a lot of what you're saying from the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I'm not sure if you read that one.
I'm a big fan of that book.
Yeah.
Some of the other things that are in that 21 Stupid Things book that are big ones is, one of them is where you get advice. And so often I'll work with clients who are trying to buy a business, and they'll get opinions and advice from people who are not in business. Right. So their neighbor, the letter carrier, who's a good guy, and their uncle and all these people, they'll ask everybody their opinions and advice, but they haven't put themselves in the middle of other entrepreneurs and other business owners. Right. And so they'll get feedback, which is often painted from a consumer point of view. Right. A lot of people who are customers will tell you what it takes to run a good business. And they'll just say, look, just keep lowering the price, you'll get more customers, right? But, businesses don't survive that way. But that's what the customer wants. They want great service, a low price, quick turnaround time. They want it all.
Yeah.
And I've had so many people who've come and they've had different opinions about things. And when I ask them, well, who told you that was a good idea? And I find out that it's not from people who are knowledgeable in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a huge, I want to finish on that one, because that's like one of the biggest ahas for me and moments that I've learned in my life, is that learn from people that have already done what you want to do, people that are successful in business and know what they're doing, rather than somebody you should just do this because of this, when they have zero experience in that, and it can be detrimental to your success. And what you're doing is, even if you do get help from somebody who's done it before, you still need to take the responsibility on yourself to take some of that with a grain of salt, whether it be from somebody who hasn't got success or not. Because if you just outsource all of your responsibility to somebody else and they make all the decisions for you, that's where, you're going to come unstuck and have a really tough time. So David, that was such a powerful episode. Like, I'm sure everybody learnt so much. I did, just from listening to you. So thank you for jumping on board. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, the central nervous system of everything I do is my blog site, davidcbarnett.com. And from there, there's links to my site for people that want to buy a business or people that want to sell a business. And I would recommend, if people are interested in deals, interested in business, join my email list, because I send out emails all the time with different conversations and topics, and links to all the new videos that I put out. I put out a new video every week. And so I'd love to have people come and join me.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And for everybody wanting to, get stuck into learning, and David teaches a lot about buying online business, or not just online businesses, sorry, bricks and mortar businesses. I also have some free resources as well if you want to check out how to buy websites. I have a due diligence framework tool that you can use, and I also have a website evaluator tool. You can get them from my website, buyingonlinebusiness.com. And thanks so much, everybody, for listening. That's it for this episode. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Share this with somebody you know who's wanting to get into business or make some sort of passive income and doesn't want to just buy themselves a job, but wants to buy themselves some time freedom and a lifestyle. And if you did like this, please be sure to review it, like it, share around, and we'll speak to you on the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jaryd.
Thanks, David.